Hey everyone, welcome back. Tonight we're going to explore something that might feel a little unfair, especially if you're lying here struggling to fall asleep. While you're tossing and turning, trying to quiet your mind, somewhere out in the ocean, a dolphin is swimming. And it hasn't slept in months. Not really. Not the way you think of sleep anyway. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video if you genuinely enjoy what we do here. Subscribe if you'd like more of these quiet explorations into the mysteries of biology. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. It's always comforting to know we're all here together, scattered across the globe, searching for rest in our own way. Now, get comfortable. Maybe adjust your pillow, pull the blanket a little higher, let the day fall away, because tonight we're diving into one of nature's strangest secrets, how some animals seem to break the rules of sleep entirely. While we humans crumble after just one sleepless night, certain creatures go days, weeks, even months without closing their eyes. And they're perfectly fine. How is that possible? What do they know that we don't? And what does their biology reveal about the very nature of rest itself? These aren't just curiosities. They're windows into understanding why sleep exists at all, why it evolved in so many different forms, and what happens when the pressure to survive forces the body to reimagine something we consider utterly essential. Think about your own relationship with sleep. Maybe you wish you needed less of it. Maybe you've tried to push through exhaustion, only to find yourself foggy, irritable, barely functional. You know what it feels like when sleep is stolen from you? Your memory falters, your mood darkens, your body aches in ways that feel deeper than muscle and bone. Sleep deprivation is a form of biological unraveling, a slow collapse of the systems that keep you alive and aware. And yet, right now, a frigate bird is soaring over the Pacific Ocean. It's been flying for weeks without landing. It hasn't touched solid ground, hasn't perched on a branch, hasn't closed both eyes at the same time. And somehow, impossibly, it's fine. Its brain is functioning, its wings are steady. It's navigating thousands of miles of open water with a precision that would make any engineer weep. How? What allows this bird to defy the very rules that govern your own exhausted body? Or consider the newborn orca born into cold, dark water. It doesn't sleep for the first month of its life, not once. It swims constantly beside its mother, who also doesn't sleep, both of them moving through the ocean in a state of perpetual wakefulness. No rest. No dreams, no shutdown of the brain, and when that month ends, the calf is healthy, strong, perfectly normal. It's as if sleep, that sacred necessity you've been told you cannot live without, is somehow optional. But is it really? Or have these animals simply found ways to sleep that we don't recognize? Forms of rest so alien to our experience that we've been looking right past them? Tonight, we're going to meet the creatures who've rewritten the rules. The dolphins who sleep with half their brain. The sharks who rest while swimming. The giraffes who close their eyes for only minutes at a time. Each one offers a different answer to the same fundamental question. What is sleep, really? And how little of it can a living thing survive on? This isn't just about animals. It's about you too. Because buried in their strange biology is a deeper truth about rest, about survival, about the elegant and sometimes brutal compromises life makes when the world demands too much. So, dim the lights if you can, let your breathing slow, and let's find out together what happens when sleep becomes negotiable. Let's begin with something you already know. something so deeply woven into your existence that you rarely question it. You need to sleep. It's not a preference or a luxury. It's a biological command, as essential as breathing or eating. Every night, your body pulls you down into unconsciousness, whether you're ready or not. And if you resist, if you try to stay awake too long, your body will eventually force the issue. You'll collapse. You'll hallucinate. You'll begin to break down at the cellular level. This need for sleep isn't unique to humans. It's written into the fabric of life itself. From the tiniest fruit fly to the largest elephant, nearly every animal on Earth sleeps. They may do it differently, in bursts or waves, standing up or hanging upside down, but they all do it. Sleep is universal. It crosses species, habitats, and evolutionary lineages. It's one of the few things that binds together the entire animal kingdom. Consider the fruit fly, a creature with a brain smaller than a pinhead. Even it requires sleep. Researchers have watched these insects settle down at night, their tiny bodies going still, their responsiveness to the world fading. And if you keep a fruit fly awake, forcing it to stay active through disturbances or genetic manipulation, it suffers. Its memory deteriorates. Its lifespan shortens. It becomes, in a very real sense, sick. Sleep, for the fruit fly, is not optional. Move up the evolutionary ladder to zebrafish, those small, striped swimmers you might find in a pet store. They sleep too, drifting motionless in the water, their brain activity slowing into predictable patterns. Deprive them of sleep, and they show signs of stress. Their immune systems weaken. Their ability to learn new tasks diminishes. Even in a brain as small and simple as a zebrafish, sleep performs essential work that cannot be skipped. Now think bigger. Rats, those infamous lab subjects, need sleep desperately. In one of the most haunting experiments in sleep research, scientists kept rats awake for extended periods using a slowly rotating platform. Every time the rat began to drift off, the platform would move, forcing it to wake and reposition itself. The results were devastating. Within 2 to 3 weeks, every single rat died. Not from physical exhaustion, not from starvation, but from sleep deprivation alone. Their bodies literally fell apart. Their immune systems collapsed. Their ability to regulate temperature failed. Sleep, it turned out, wasn't just restful. It was life-sustaining. Humans fare no better. We know this from cruel historical experiments, from torture records, from medical case studies of people with fatal familial insomnia, a rare genetic disorder that destroys the brain's ability to sleep. These individuals deteriorate rapidly. They lose weight despite eating. They hallucinate. They develop dementia-like symptoms, and within months they die. Sleep deprivation is lethal, not metaphorically, but literally. It kills. Even partial sleep deprivation exacts a toll. Stay awake for just 24 hours, and your cognitive abilities plummet to levels comparable to legal intoxication. Your reaction times slow. Your memory falters. Your emotional regulation crumbles, leaving you irritable, anxious, prone to irrational decisions. Push it to 48 hours, and you'll start experiencing microsleeps, brief moments where your brain shuts down involuntarily, even while your eyes are open. You could be walking, talking, driving, and your brain simply checks out for a few seconds. It's your body's desperate attempt to grab rest in whatever way it can. At the cellular level, sleep is a time of repair. While you're unconscious, your brain is flushing out metabolic waste through the glymphatic system, a network of channels that opens up during deep sleep to clear out toxins that accumulate during waking hours. One of these toxins is beta amyloid, a protein that, when it builds up, is associated with Alzheimer's disease. Without sleep, this waste lingers, clogs, potentially damages the very neurons that make you who you are. Is less than #0. 7 is greater than. Your immune system also depends on sleep. During deep sleep, your body produces cytokines, proteins that fight infection and inflammation. Miss a few nights of sleep, and your vulnerability to illness spikes. You're more likely to catch a cold, more likely to develop chronic conditions, more likely to take longer to heal from injuries. Sleep isn't rest in the passive sense. It's active maintenance, a nightly tune-up that keeps every system in your body functioning. And it's not just your body. Your mind needs sleep too. Memory consolidation happens during sleep, particularly during REM, rapid eye movement sleep, when your brain replays the day's experiences, sorting them, filing them, weaving them into the fabric of long-term memory. Without sleep, learning becomes nearly impossible. You can take in information, but it won't stick. It'll slip away, lost in the fog of exhaustion. So sleep is essential, not just helpful, not just recommended, but absolutely, fundamentally necessary for survival. Every creature with a nervous system, from jellyfish to whales, shows some form of rest or sleep-like state. It's been preserved across hundreds of millions of years of evolution, which tells us something important. Sleep must confer massive survival advantages. If it didn't, if it were just a vulnerability, a time of helplessness when predators could strike, evolution would have weeded it out long ago. But it didn't. Sleep stayed, it deepened, it diversified. And yet, despite this universality, despite the overwhelming evidence that sleep is non-negotiable, there are exceptions. Creatures that seem to bend the rules, that survive with far less sleep than should be possible, or that sleep in ways so strange we barely recognize it as sleep at all. These animals haven't escaped the need for rest, but they've found ways to negotiate with it, to bargain, to meet their biological needs while also meeting the demands of a world that doesn't stop for anyone. The question isn't whether sleep is necessary. It is. The question is, how flexible is that necessity? How far can it be stretched, reshaped, redefined? And what do these strange sleepers reveal about the very nature of consciousness, rest, and survival? That's what we're here to explore. Because if nearly every animal needs to sleep, then the ones who don't, or who barely do, are telling us something profound about what sleep really is. And maybe, just maybe, they're showing us that the rules we thought were unbreakable are actually more negotiable than we ever imagined. Before we can understand how some animals survive without sleep, we need to ask a more fundamental question. What is sleep? Exactly. It sounds simple. You close your eyes, you lose consciousness, you wake up hours later. But if that's all sleep is, then a coma would count, anesthesia would count, fainting would count, and clearly, those aren't the same thing. Sleep is something more specific, more structured, and far stranger than just shutting down. Let's start with what happens in your brain when you sleep. If scientists were to attach electrodes to your scalp right now and measure your brain's electrical activity, they'd see waves, patterns of synchronized firing across millions of neurons. When you're awake and alert, those waves are fast and irregular, a chaotic symphony of thought, perception, and reaction. But as you drift towards sleep, something shifts. The waves slow down. They become more rhythmic, more organized. Your brain isn't shutting off, it's changing modes. Sleep isn't one thing. It's a cycle. a carefully choreographed sequence of stages that your brain moves through multiple times each night. First comes light sleep, stage 1, where you're hovering on the edge of consciousness. You might twitch. You might feel like you're falling. Your muscles relax, your heart rate slows, and your brain begins to disengage from the outside world. This is the transition, the doorway between waking and true sleep. Then you descend into stage 2, a deeper but still relatively light sleep. Your body temperature drops, your eye movements stop, your brain produces sudden bursts of activity called sleep spindles, brief flashes of electrical firing that seem to play a role in memory consolidation and sensory processing. You're not easily woken at this point, but a loud noise or a hand on your shoulder might still pull you back. Next comes the deep sleep, stages 3 and 4, sometimes grouped together as slow wave sleep. This is where the magic happens. Your brain waves slow to a crawl, massive rolling oscillations that sweep across your cortex like ocean tides. Your blood pressure drops. Your breathing becomes steady and deep. Growth hormone is released, repairing tissues, building muscle, strengthening bones. This is the sleep that makes you feel restored. If you're woken from deep sleep, you'll feel groggy, disoriented, almost drugged. Your brain was far away, doing essential work in the depths. And then, after cycling through these stages, something extraordinary happens. You enter REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep, and suddenly your brain lights up again. The electrical activity surges, resembling the pattern of waking consciousness. Your eyes dart back and forth beneath closed lids, tracking images only you can see. Your body becomes paralyzed, a protective mechanism that keeps you from acting out your dreams. Because this is when you dream most vividly, most bizarrely, most memorably. REM sleep is where your brain processes emotions, consolidates memories, and perhaps rehearses scenarios, playing out possibilities in a safe, imaginary space. This cycle, from light sleep to deep sleep to REM and back again, repeats 4 to 6 times each night in humans. Each cycle lasts roughly 90 minutes, though the proportions shift as the night progresses. Early cycles are heavy on deep sleep. Later cycles give more time to REM. It's a rhythm, a biological ballet that your brain has been performing every night since you were born. But here's the thing, not all animals sleep like this. Not all animals even have REM sleep. Birds and mammals do, but reptiles show only hints of it. Fish seem to lack it entirely. And insects, those tiny creatures with brains barely larger than a grain of sand, have something that looks like sleep, but without the clearly defined stages we see in mammals. They rest. They become less responsive. Their metabolic rate drops. But is it sleep in the way we understand it? Or is it something else? Something simpler, more ancient? This is where defining sleep gets tricky. Scientists have developed criteria, a checklist of features that distinguish true sleep from mere rest. First, there must be reduced responsiveness to the environment. A sleeping animal doesn't react as quickly to sounds, lights, or touch. Second, the state must be rapidly reversible. You can wake a sleeping animal with enough stimulation, unlike a hibernating one or an anesthetized one. Third, sleep must be regulated. If you deprive an animal of sleep, it will show a rebound effect, sleeping longer or deeper to make up for lost time. And fourth, sleep must serve some restorative function. The animal should show signs of impairment without it. By these criteria, even creatures without recognizable REM sleep or slow wave patterns can still be said to sleep. A jellyfish, pulsing gently in dark water, shows periods of reduced activity and responsiveness that meet the basic definition. A roundworm, barely visible to the naked eye, has sleep-like states controlled by specific genes. Sleep, it turns out, predates complex brains. It's not a luxury invented by mammals. It's an ancient, fundamental state that evolved early in the history of life, perhaps even before nervous systems existed in their current form. But if sleep is so variable, if it can range from the elaborate cycles of human sleep to the simple quiescence of a worm, then maybe the question isn't whether an animal sleeps. Maybe the question is how it sleeps. What form does rest take? What trade-offs has evolution made? Because in the natural world, sleep is always a compromise. It's time spent vulnerable, unaware, unable to feed or flee or fight. Any animal that sleeps is taking a risk. And so evolution has sculpted sleep into 1,000 different shapes, each one tailored to the specific dangers and demands of a particular life. A bat sleeps upside down in a dark cave, safe from predators, and can afford to sleep for up to 20 hours a day. A gazelle sleeps in brief, vigilant bursts on the open savanna, never fully unconscious, always ready to run. A dolphin, as we'll soon see, sleeps with only half its brain at a time, keeping one eye open, one flipper moving, navigating a world where stopping means sinking. Sleep is not one strategy. It's a spectrum of strategies, each shaped by the relentless pressures of survival. And this flexibility, this ability of evolution to tinker with something as fundamental as sleep, is what allows certain animals to push the boundaries. To sleep less, to sleep differently, to sleep in ways that seem, from our perspective, barely like sleep at all. Understanding this is the key to understanding the sleepless. They haven't escaped the rules. They've simply rewritten them in ways we're only beginning to comprehend. And that rewriting starts with one of the strangest sleep strategies ever discovered, a way of sleeping that lets an animal be awake and asleep at the exact same time. Imagine for a moment that you could sleep with only half your brain. The left hemisphere shuts down, drifting into deep, restorative sleep, while the right hemisphere stays awake, alert, watching the world. You'd be conscious and unconscious at the same time. One eye closed, one eye open, half of you dreaming, half of you aware. It sounds like science fiction, like something from a fever dream. But for dolphins, it's just another night, or day, or whenever they decide to rest. This is called unihemispheric slow-wave sleep, and it's one of the most elegant solutions to an impossible problem that evolution has ever devised. Dolphins are mammals, just like you. They're warm-blooded, they nurse their young, and they breathe air. But unlike you, they live in the ocean, a place where you can't simply lie down and close your eyes. If a dolphin were to fall into full, deep sleep the way you do, it would sink, it would stop swimming, and most critically, it would stop breathing. Dolphins are conscious breathers. Every breath is a choice, a deliberate surfacing, a decision to inhale. There is no autopilot, no brainstem reflex keeping the lungs working while the mind wanders. If a dolphin loses consciousness completely, it drowns. So dolphins do something remarkable. They split the difference. While one hemisphere of the brain sleeps, generating those slow, rolling delta waves, characteristic of deep rest, the other hemisphere remains awake, maintaining just enough awareness to keep the body moving, to monitor the surroundings, to rise to the surface and breathe. Then, after a few hours, they switch. The rested hemisphere takes over, and the tired one finally gets to sleep. It's a rotating shift, a biological changing of the guard that happens seamlessly, without fanfare, beneath the waves. If you could watch a sleeping dolphin, you'd notice something strange. One eye is closed. The other is open, tracking movement, watching for threats or opportunities. The closed eye corresponds to the sleeping hemisphere, the open one to the wakeful side. The dolphin continues to swim, but more slowly, more languidly, tracing lazy circles through the water. It's not fully present, but it's not fully absent either. It exists in a liminal state, caught between two worlds, neither entirely awake nor entirely asleep. This ability isn't unique to dolphins. It's shared by many marine mammals, creatures who face the same existential dilemma, the need to breathe air while living in water. Orcas, those magnificent black and white hunters, sleep this way. So do seals, sea lions, and manatees. Each species has adapted the strategy slightly differently, tailored to their specific needs and dangers, but the core principle remains the same. Sleep, but not completely. Rest, but stay ready. Scientists first discovered unihemispheric sleep in the 1960s, when researchers studying bottlenose dolphins noticed the strange EEG patterns. Electrodes placed on the dolphin's head showed that one side of the brain was producing the slow waves of deep sleep, while the other side hummed with waking activity. It was baffling at first, as if the animal had been cut in two, each half living independently. But over time, the genius of it became clear. This wasn't a malfunction. It was a feature, a sophisticated adaptation that allowed dolphins to inhabit a world that would otherwise be lethal to an air-breathing mammal. But unihemispheric sleep isn't just about breathing, it's also about safety. The ocean is not a gentle place. It's filled with predators, even for a dolphin. Sharks patrol the depths. Orcas, despite being dolphins themselves, hunt other marine mammals. And then there are the subtler dangers. Strong currents, disorientation, separation from the pod. A dolphin that fell into full, unconscious sleep would be vulnerable in ways that could mean death. By keeping half the brain awake, the dolphin maintains a thread of awareness, just enough to sense danger, to react, to flee if necessary. Interestingly, unihemispheric sleep also plays a role in social cohesion. Dolphins are intensely social animals. They live in pods, tight-knit groups that hunt together, play together, and protect one another. Even while sleeping, a dolphin needs to stay loosely connected to the pod, to keep pace, to not drift away into the dark. That wakeful hemisphere keeps track of the others, maintaining proximity, ensuring that the dolphin doesn't become isolated and vulnerable. Some birds have also evolved a form of unihemispheric sleep, though for different reasons. Ducks, for instance, sleep in groups along the water's edge. The ducks on the outside of the group, the ones most exposed to predators, sleep with one hemisphere at a time, keeping the outward-facing eye open. The ducks in the middle, surrounded and protected, sleep more deeply with both hemispheres. It's a rotating guard duty, a strategy that balances the need for rest with the need for vigilance. The group as a whole is never fully asleep, never fully unaware. But unihemispheric sleep comes with costs. It's not as restorative as full bilateral sleep. Studies suggest that dolphins and other marine mammals don't experience REM sleep in the same way land mammals do, or if they do, it's extremely brief and rare. REM sleep, remember, is when your brain processes emotions, consolidates certain types of memory, and perhaps even dreams. Dolphins may be sacrificing some of this in exchange for survival. They get the slow-wave sleep necessary for basic neural maintenance, but they may be missing out on the deeper, more complex restoration that REM provides. And yet, dolphins are intelligent, profoundly so. They use tools, they recognize themselves in mirrors, they communicate with signature whistles that function almost like names. Their brains are large, complex, deeply folded. If REM sleep is so important for cognition, how do dolphins manage to be so smart without much of it? The answer isn't entirely clear. Perhaps their unihemispheric sleep compensates in ways we don't yet understand. Perhaps their brains have evolved alternative pathways for the work that REM sleep does in other animals. Or perhaps REM sleep, for all its importance, is more flexible than we thought. What's certain is that unihemispheric sleep is a compromise, a negotiation between the body's need for rest and the environment's refusal to allow it. Dolphins don't sleep less because they need less sleep. They sleep differently because their world demands it. They've taken one of the most fundamental states of consciousness and split it in half, creating something entirely new, something that allows them to inhabit the boundary between waking and dreaming, between vulnerability and vigilance. It's a solution born of necessity, refined over millions of years, and it works. The dolphin swims on, half asleep, half awake, living proof that even sleep, that most universal of needs, can be reshaped when survival demands it. If dolphins have mastered the art of sleeping with half a brain, then migratory birds have taken it even further. They've learned to sleep on the wing, mid-flight, thousands of feet above the earth, riding air currents with their eyes half closed and their consciousness flickering in and out like a candle in the wind. These birds don't just minimize sleep, they steal it in seconds, in fragments so brief you'd barely notice if you were watching. And somehow, impossibly, it's enough. Consider the alpine swift, a small, sleek bird that spends nearly its entire life in the air. From the moment it fledges and leaves the nest, it may not touch solid ground again for months, sometimes years. It eats insects on the wing, it drinks by skimming water surfaces, it mates in flight, and it sleeps, if you can call it that, while gliding through the night sky. Researchers tracked these birds using tiny data loggers attached to their backs, devices that measured brain activity, heart rate, and wing movements. What they found was astonishing. The swifts didn't stop flying at night. They continued moving, sometimes climbing to altitudes of over 6,000 feet, riding thermal currents that kept them aloft with minimal effort. And during these long nocturnal glides, their brain activity changed. It slowed. It entered brief periods of slow-wave sleep, the same restorative state you experience in deep sleep. But here's the remarkable part. These sleep episodes lasted only seconds at a time. A few seconds of slow-wave activity in one hemisphere, then a switch to the other hemisphere, then back again. Tiny stolen moments of rest, stitched together across the hours of darkness. And sometimes, for just a few seconds, both hemispheres would sleep simultaneously. The bird would be, for that fleeting instant, fully asleep while flying. Its wings would lock into a glide, its body coasting on momentum and air pressure. A vessel carried by physics while consciousness briefly disappeared. Then, just as quickly, it would wake. The whole event might last 10 seconds, maybe less. But it happened again and again, dozens of times throughout the night, accumulating into something that resembled, if you squinted, sleep. The frigate bird takes this strategy even further. These large seabirds, with their deeply forked tails and 7-foot wingspans, are masters of oceanic soaring. They can fly for weeks without landing, crossing vast stretches of open water in search of food. Like the alpine swift, they sleep in flight, but their sleep is even more fragmented, even more precarious. Studies using EEG recordings showed that frigate birds sleep for an average of only 42 minutes per day while flying. 42 minutes, broken into thousands of micro-sleeps, each one barely longer than a blink. By comparison, when these same birds are on land, safe on their nests, they sleep for over 12 hours. 12 hours versus 42 minutes. The difference is staggering. It tells us that these birds aren't avoiding sleep by choice. They're not some superhuman or superavian exception that simply doesn't need rest. They need it desperately. But while they're flying, while they're over open ocean with no place to land, they make do with scraps. They ration their sleep like survivors rationing water in a desert, taking only what they absolutely must to keep functioning. And yet, they function. They navigate with precision. They hunt successfully. They avoid collisions, maintain altitude, adjust for wind patterns. Their cognitive abilities remain sharp enough to perform complex tasks that require split-second timing and spatial awareness. How? How does a brain operate on 42 minutes of fragmented sleep when you, after a single night of poor rest, can barely remember where you left your keys? The answer seems to lie in the strategic use of unihemispheric sleep, combined with those rare moments of bilateral sleep. By allowing each hemisphere to rest independently, the bird ensures that at least part of its brain is always functional, always processing information, always keeping the body safe. And those brief instances of full sleep when both hemispheres shut down simultaneously may provide just enough deep restoration to keep the most critical neural systems operational. It's not ideal, it's not comfortable, but it works well enough to survive. There's also evidence that these birds may enter a state of reduced metabolic demand during flight, a kind of autopilot mode where the brain requires less energy and can therefore function on less sleep. The rhythmic motion of gliding, the steady sensory input from the wind and the horizon, may create a meditative state that's not quite waking and not quite sleeping, but somewhere in between. A twilight consciousness that serves as a bridge, allowing the bird to rest without fully surrendering awareness. Think about what this means. These birds are living proof that sleep can be compressed, fragmented, reduced to its absolute essentials, and still be enough. Not enough to thrive, perhaps, but enough to survive. And survival, in evolutionary terms, is all that matters. If a bird can stay alive long enough to reproduce, to pass on its genes, then whatever sleep strategy it's using is, by definition, successful. Natural selection doesn't care if you're tired. It only cares if you're alive. But there's a cost. When the birds finally return to land, they crash. They sleep deeply, voraciously, making up for lost time. Their bodies are in debt, and that debt must be paid. The sleep they skipped over the ocean wasn't optional. It was deferred, postponed. And eventually, the bill comes due. This suggests that even these incredible avian athletes can't truly escape the need for sleep. They can delay it, minimize it, stretch it thin, but they can't eliminate it. Still, the fact that they can delay it for so long is remarkable. It tells us that sleep, while essential, is also negotiable in ways we're only beginning to understand. The brain has backup systems, workarounds, compromises that allow it to keep functioning even under extreme sleep deprivation. In humans, these systems fail relatively quickly. We don't have the same flexibility, but in birds, in dolphins, in other animals that face similar pressures, evolution has found ways to stretch the limits, to push sleep into strange new shapes that barely resemble the deep, uninterrupted rest we consider normal. And if birds can sleep for mere seconds at a time while soaring over the Pacific, then what other variations might exist? What other creatures have bent the rules of sleep into forms we haven't yet discovered? The answer, as we'll see, is stranger than flight itself. If you've ever spent a night awake with a newborn, you know the exhaustion that comes from constant vigilance. Every few hours, a cry pulls you from the edge of sleep. You stumble through the dark, feed, soothe, change, and by the time you collapse back into bed, it feels like only minutes before it starts again. Days blur into nights. Your memory falters. Your patience frays. You become a shadow of yourself, running on fumes, wondering how much longer you can survive like this. Now, imagine that instead of a few weeks or months, this continues for an entire month without pause. No sleep at all, not a single minute. You'd break. Your body would shut down. But for newborn orcas and dolphins, this is simply how life begins. When a dolphin calf is born, it enters the world swimming. There's no nest, no den, no safe place to rest. The ocean doesn't stop moving, and neither can the calf. Within minutes of birth, it must surface to take its first breath, a conscious act that requires awareness and coordination. And from that moment on, for the next month or more, it doesn't sleep. Not in any conventional sense. Its eyes stay open. Its body stays in motion. It swims constantly beside its mother, matching her pace, learning to navigate the endless blue. And the mother? She doesn't sleep either. For those same weeks, the mother orca or dolphin remains awake, guiding her calf, protecting it from predators, teaching it the rhythms of breathing and movement. Two mammals, both supposedly dependent on sleep for survival, going an entire month without it. No slow wave sleep, no REM sleep, no rest. And at the end of that month, when researchers finally observe the first signs of sleep returning, both mother and calf appear healthy. No apparent damage, no cognitive decline, no immune collapse. They simply begin sleeping again, as if the previous month of wakefulness had been a temporary suspension of the rules. This phenomenon was first documented carefully in the late 1990s, when marine biologists studying captive dolphins noticed that newborn calves never closed their eyes. The researchers monitored the calves around the clock, watching for any sign of sleep, any brief moment of rest. They found none. The calves were perpetually active, their eyes tracking movement, their bodies responding to stimuli with the alertness of an animal fully awake. It defied everything science understood about mammalian sleep. How could a newborn, with its developing brain and fragile body, survive without sleep? The answer seems to lie in the unique pressures of marine mammal life. Newborn dolphins and orcas face challenges that land mammals don't. First, there's buoyancy. A newborn calf has very little body fat compared to an adult. It's less buoyant, more prone to sinking if it stops swimming. Constant movement isn't optional, it's survival. If the calf were to fall asleep in the way a human infant does, deeply and completely, it would sink beneath the surface and drown. There's no shallow water, no solid ground to rest on. The ocean offers no mercy to the unconscious. Second, there's temperature regulation. Newborn marine mammals are born into water that's often significantly colder than their body temperature. They haven't yet developed the thick layer of blubber that insulates adults. Movement generates heat, Swimming keeps the blood flowing, the muscles working, the core temperature stable. Sleep, with its reduction in metabolic rate and muscle activity, would be dangerous. The calf would cool too quickly, risking hypothermia in those critical early weeks. Third, there's predation. A newborn dolphin or orca is vulnerable. Sharks patrol the waters. Even other orcas from rival pods pose a threat. The calf must stay close to its mother, must remain alert enough to follow her movements, to flee if danger approaches. Sleep would be a liability, a gap in awareness that could mean death. So the calf stays awake, and the mother stays awake with it, a sentinel guarding her offspring through those first precarious weeks. But how do they do it? How does the brain, that organ so dependent on sleep for maintenance and repair, continue functioning without rest? The truth is, we don't entirely know. One theory is that the extreme youth of the calf's brain offers some protection. Newborn brains are different from adult brains. They're more plastic, more adaptable, still building the neural circuits that will define their future. Perhaps, in this early stage, the brain can tolerate sleep deprivation in ways that an adult brain cannot. The metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours, the toxins that usually require sleep to clear, might not build up as quickly in a developing brain. Or perhaps the brain has alternative mechanisms for clearing waste, mechanisms that are active only during this brief window of early life. Another possibility is that the calves aren't entirely sleepless, but are experiencing a form of rest so subtle, so different from adult sleep, that we simply don't recognize it. Perhaps their brains enter micro-rest states, brief flickers of reduced activity that occur while they're still swimming, still responsive, still technically awake. These states might not register on an EEG as sleep, but they could still provide some of the restorative functions that sleep normally offers. It would be a form of sleep so minimal, so compressed, that it's invisible to our current methods of measurement. What's fascinating is that this sleeplessness is temporary. After about a month, the calves begin to sleep. Slowly at first, in brief intervals, using the unihemispheric sleep strategy that adult dolphins employ. One hemisphere rests while the other stays awake. And as the calf grows, as it gains fat and strength and experience, it sleeps more normally, more regularly, settling into the rhythms that will carry it through the rest of its life. The month of wakefulness isn't permanent. It's a phase, an adaptation to the unique demands of infancy in the ocean. This tells us something profound about sleep's flexibility, especially in early development. The newborn mammalian brain, it seems, is more resilient to sleep loss than we ever imagined. It can survive, at least temporarily, without the restorative processes we consider essential. And if a newborn orca can go a month without sleep, what does that say about the nature of sleep itself? Is it truly non-negotiable, or is it more like a spectrum, with different ages, different species, different life stages requiring different amounts and different forms of rest? Of course, this doesn't mean sleep is optional. The fact that the calves eventually do begin sleeping suggests that the sleepless period comes with costs that are simply deferred rather than avoided. The brain may be able to run on empty for a while, especially when survival demands it, but eventually the tank needs refilling. Sleep returns because it must. The question is just how long that return can be delayed. And in the case of newborn orcas, the answer is longer than anyone thought possible. An entire month, stolen from rest, given to survival, and somehow, against all odds, it works. Sit by the edge of a pond at night, and you might hear them. A deep, resonant chorus rising from the water, the unmistakable croaking of bullfrogs calling to one another in the darkness. They seem tireless, these amphibians, sitting motionless on lily pads or half submerged in mud, their eyes wide and unblinking, their throats pulsing with sound. And for decades, scientists believed something remarkable about them, that bullfrogs never sleep. Not ever. That they spent their entire lives in a state of perpetual wakefulness, watching, waiting, alert from the moment they emerged from tadpole form until the day they died. It was a claim that appeared in textbooks, in nature documentaries, in casual conversations about the strange exceptions of the animal kingdom. The sleepless bullfrog, always awake, always aware. But like many bold claims in biology, this one turned out to be more complicated than it first appeared. The truth about bullfrog sleep isn't that they don't do it. It's that we may not have been looking for it in the right way. The idea that bullfrogs never sleep came from studies conducted in the 1960s and 70s. Researchers observed bullfrogs for extended periods, monitoring their behavior, their responsiveness, their posture. They found that bullfrogs remained alert even during what should have been rest periods. Poke a sleeping mammal, and it takes time to rouse. Poke a resting bullfrog, and it reacts almost instantly, leaping away or snapping at the intrusion. The frogs showed no signs of the reduced responsiveness that typically defines sleep. They didn't close their eyes, because frogs don't have eyelids that fully close. They didn't adopt a specific sleep posture. They just sat there, still and watchful, as they always did. The researchers concluded that bullfrogs must not sleep, or if they did, it was so light and brief that it barely counted. This made a kind of intuitive sense. Bullfrogs are ambush predators and prey animals simultaneously. They sit at the water's edge, waiting for insects or small fish to come within striking distance, and they must also remain vigilant against herons, snakes, and other predators. In their world, letting your guard down could mean death. Maybe, the thinking went, they simply couldn't afford to sleep. Maybe evolution had found a way to eliminate the need entirely. But more recent research has cast doubt on this conclusion. The problem wasn't that bullfrogs don't sleep. The problem was that scientists were defining sleep using criteria developed for mammals and birds. Warm-blooded creatures with complex brains and predictable circadian rhythms. Bullfrogs are cold-blooded. Their metabolism slows dramatically with temperature. Their brain structure is simpler, lacking the elaborate cortical folds and neural networks that characterize mammalian sleep. Measuring sleep in a bullfrog using an EEG designed for humans is like trying to read a book written in a language you don't speak. You might see patterns, but you won't understand what they mean. When researchers began looking more carefully, using more sensitive equipment and broader definitions of rest, they found something interesting. Bullfrogs do show periods of reduced activity. Their heart rate slows, their breathing becomes more regular, their muscle tone decreases. They become less responsive to minor disturbances, though they still react quickly to significant threats. These changes are subtle, far more subtle than the dramatic shift from waking to sleeping that you experience, but they're there. The bullfrog isn't entirely sleepless. It's just resting in a way that doesn't fit neatly into our categories. This raises a deeper question. What counts as sleep? If an animal shows reduced responsiveness but can still react quickly, is that sleep or just quiet wakefulness? If the brain activity doesn't match the slow waves we see in mammals, does that mean there's no sleep? Or does it mean sleep looks different in that species? These aren't just semantic questions. They go to the heart of what sleep is and why it evolved. Perhaps sleep in its most ancient form isn't about losing consciousness. Perhaps it's simply about reducing activity, conserving energy, allowing the body to perform maintenance tasks that are easier to do when the animal isn't moving or hunting or fleeing. In cold-blooded animals like bullfrogs, the line between rest and sleep may be blurrier than in mammals. Temperature plays a huge role in their physiology. A cold bullfrog is sluggish, its metabolism barely ticking over. It might sit motionless for hours, not because it's asleep, but because it's too cold to move efficiently. As the sun warms the water, the frog becomes more active, more responsive. Is the cold period sleep? Is it torpor? Is it something else entirely? The answer depends on how you define your terms, and those definitions are still being debated. What we do know is that bullfrogs, like every other animal studied so far, show some form of rest. They don't maintain the same level of activity and alertness 24 hours a day. There are peaks and valleys in their behavior, times when they're more active and times when they're quieter, more still. Whether we call that sleep or not may be less important than recognizing that even in creatures as seemingly simple as a frog, the body has rhythms, cycles, periods of activity and recovery. The controversy around bullfrog sleep also highlights how much we still don't know about sleep in non-mammalian species. Most sleep research focuses on humans, rats, and a handful of other mammals. Birds get some attention, but reptiles, amphibians, fish, and invertebrates are vastly understudied. We assume that because they don't sleep the way we do, they must not need sleep as much, but maybe they need it just as much. Maybe they've simply evolved different ways of getting it, ways that are harder for us to recognize and measure. Consider the paradox. If bullfrogs truly never slept, if they remained in a state of constant vigilance for their entire lives, they would be a biological miracle. They would be proof that sleep, despite all the evidence, is not actually essential. But if they do sleep, even in a form we barely recognize, then they're just another data point supporting the universality of rest. Either way, they're telling us something important. Either sleep is more flexible than we imagined, or our methods of detecting it are too narrow, too bound by mammalian bias.
The bullfrog sits at the edge of the pond, eyes wide, throat pulsing with sound. Is it awake? Is it resting?
Is it somewhere in between, inhabiting a state of consciousness that we don't have words for? We don't know for certain. But the fact that we're still asking the question, still refining our understanding of what sleep is and how to measure it, suggests that the mystery runs deeper than a single species. It suggests that sleep itself, that universal and ancient state, may be far stranger and more varied than we ever suspected. And if a bullfrog can blur the line between waking and sleeping so thoroughly that scientists still can't agree on the answer, then what other creatures might be hiding rest in plain sight, sleeping in ways we simply haven't learned to see, is less than #0. 7 is greater than. Deep beneath the surface, where sunlight fades to blue and then to black, sharks glide through the water with a grace that seems almost effortless. They've been doing this for over 400 million years, long before dinosaurs walked the earth, long before mammals crawled onto land. And in all that time, evolution has refined them into nearly perfect predators. But perfection comes with constraints. And for some sharks, one of those constraints is this: they must keep moving or they die. Not all sharks face this problem. Many species, like nurse sharks and wobbegongs, can rest comfortably on the ocean floor, pumping water over their gills using a method called buccal pumping. They open and close their mouths, drawing water in and forcing it across the gill membranes where oxygen is extracted. It's an active process, but it doesn't require forward motion. These sharks can afford to stop, to settle into the sand, to sleep in something resembling the way other animals sleep. But other sharks, the great whites, the makos, the hammerheads, rely on a different method called ram ventilation. They swim with their mouths slightly open, and the forward motion forces water over their gills. It's efficient, requiring less muscular effort than buccal pumping, but it has one critical drawback. If the shark stops swimming, water stops flowing, and the shark begins to suffocate. For these species, movement isn't optional. It's as necessary as breathing, because movement is breathing. So the question becomes, how does a shark that must swim constantly ever rest? Do these animals sleep at all, or have they somehow transcended the need, becoming perpetual motion machines that never pause, never slow, never shut down? For years, this was one of the great mysteries of marine biology. Sharks were observed swimming endlessly, day and night, their torpedo-shaped bodies cutting through the water without any obvious sign of rest. Some scientists speculated that sharks might not sleep, that their ancient, relatively simple brains might not require the restorative processes that more complex brains depend on. But that theory never quite made sense. Sharks, for all their evolutionary age, are not simple creatures. Their brains are well developed, capable of learning, memory, and complex spatial navigation. They can recognize individuals, remember feeding locations, and adapt their hunting strategies based on experience. All of this requires neural maintenance, the clearing of metabolic waste, the strengthening of synaptic connections. The same processes that make sleep necessary in other animals should apply to sharks as well. And so researchers began looking more carefully. Instead of asking whether sharks sleep, they asked whether sharks show any signs of rest states, periods of reduced activity, or altered consciousness that might serve the same function as sleep. What they found was subtle but significant. Sharks do slow down. During certain periods, particularly at night, some species reduce their swimming speed, moving just fast enough to maintain water flow over their gills, but no faster. Their movements become more automatic, less responsive to their surroundings. They enter a kind of cruising mode, a state where the body continues its essential functions, but the brain dials back its engagement with the world. This is reminiscent of the microsleeps observed in migrating birds, those brief moments of reduced consciousness that occur while the body remains in motion. Sharks may be doing something similar, allowing parts of their brain to rest, while other parts maintain the basic motor control needed to keep swimming. It's not full sleep, not the deep unconsciousness you experience when you collapse into bed after a long day, but it's something, a compromise between the need for rest and the unforgiving demands of their physiology. There's also evidence that some sharks seek out specific locations where water currents do the work for them. Underwater caves and channels where strong currents flow can provide a kind of passive ventilation. A shark positioned correctly in one of these currents can remain stationary, or nearly so, while water continues to rush over its gills. In these spots, sharks have been observed resting for extended periods, their bodies still, their eyes half closed if sharks could be said to close their eyes at all. It's as close to traditional sleep as a ram ventilating shark can get, a brief reprieve from the constant need to swim. But even in these moments of rest, the shark is not entirely unconscious. It remains responsive to threats, to the sudden appearance of prey or predator. The rest is light, fragile, easily interrupted. It's the sleep of an animal that cannot afford to fully let go, that must remain tethered to awareness even in its quietest moments. And this may be the key to understanding shark rest. It's not about achieving deep, restorative sleep. It's about finding just enough rest to keep the brain functional, while never compromising survival. This strategy has parallels in other continuously active animals. Tuna, for instance, face a similar challenge. They're also ram ventilators, and they also swim constantly. Migratory birds, as we've discussed, sleep in flight. Newborn dolphins swim without rest. Across the animal kingdom, whenever an animal's survival strategy requires constant movement, sleep becomes fragmented, minimized, or transformed into something almost unrecognizable. The need for rest doesn't disappear, but it adapts, finding the smallest possible foothold in a life that offers no pause. What's particularly interesting about sharks is what they reveal about the evolutionary priority of sleep versus other survival needs. In humans, in most mammals, sleep is protected. Your body will force you to sleep, even if you try to resist. You'll experience microsleeps, those brief lapses where your brain shuts down involuntarily. You'll hallucinate, stumble, eventually collapse. Sleep is non-negotiable, but in sharks, breathing takes precedence. The body has found a way to rest without ever fully stopping, because stopping means death. It's a stark reminder that evolution is about trade-offs, about balancing competing needs, and that sometimes one need must be sacrificed, or at least severely compromised, to meet another. This doesn't mean sharks have escaped the biological necessity of rest. It means they've minimized it, compressed it, woven it into the fabric of their constant motion. They've paid the cost of a life that requires perpetual swimming by accepting a form of rest that's always partial, always vigilant, always one sudden movement away from full wakefulness. And in doing so, they've survived for hundreds of millions of years, outlasting countless other species that perhaps slept more soundly but adapted less successfully to the changing conditions of the ocean. So, when you imagine a great white shark cutting through dark water, know that it's not entirely awake, but it's not entirely asleep either. It exists in a liminal space, a shadow state between consciousness and rest, doing just enough of both to survive. It's a compromise forged by evolution, refined across eons, and it works. The shark swims on, half resting, half alert, a creature that has turned motion itself into a form of sleep. Imagine living your entire life in complete darkness, no sunrise to wake you, no sunset to signal rest, no shadows lengthening across the ground, no changing quality of light to mark the passage of hours, just endless, absolute black, the kind of darkness so total that the concept of sight becomes meaningless. This is the world of the Mexican blind cavefish, a small, pale creature that lives in the lightless depths of underwater caves in Mexico and the southern United States. And in this world, without day or night, something strange has happened to sleep. The Mexican blind cavefish, scientifically known as Astyanax mexicanus, is actually the same species as a surface-dwelling fish that lives in rivers and streams above ground. The surface fish are normal in every way. They have eyes, they have pigmented skin, and they sleep on a regular schedule, following the rhythms of day and night like most other animals. But thousands of years ago, some of these fish found their way into underground caves, and over countless generations, they adapted to a life without light. Their eyes gradually disappeared, not all at once, but slowly, shrinking and sinking beneath the skin until only vestigial remnants remained. Their bodies lost pigmentation, becoming translucent and ghostly pale, and their sleep, that universal rhythm, began to change as well. The cavefish sleep far less than their surface-dwelling cousins. Studies have shown that while surface fish sleep for several hours each day, cave fish sleep for only about 2 hours, and even that sleep is fragmented, broken into brief episodes scattered across the day and night, if those terms even mean anything in a place without light. The cavefish don't have a circadian rhythm in the traditional sense. They don't follow a 24-hour cycle of activity and rest. Instead, they seem to exist in a state of near constant wakefulness, always moving, always searching for food in an environment where meals are scarce and unpredictable. This reduction in sleep isn't a fluke. It's evolved independently in multiple cave populations. Different groups of fish, isolated in different cave systems, have all arrived at the same solution: sleep less. This suggests that something about the cave environment actively selects against sleep, that there's an evolutionary advantage to staying awake in the darkness. But what could that advantage be? Why would a fish living in a safe, predator-free cave need to sacrifice sleep? The answer seems to be food, or rather, the lack of it. Underground caves are nutrient-poor environments. There's no sunlight, which means no photosynthesis, which means no plants at the base of the food chain. Cave ecosystems rely on nutrients that wash in from the surface world: organic debris, bat guano, the occasional unfortunate creature that falls into the water. Food is rare and unpredictable. When it appears, it's a windfall. And when it's absent, which is most of the time, the fish must search constantly, exploring every crevice and crack, never knowing when the next meal might arrive. In this context, sleep becomes a liability. An animal that sleeps for several hours a day might miss the brief window when food is available. It might be resting while a competitor finds and consumes the only edible matter in the area. Over generations, the fish that slept less, that remained more vigilant, that searched more persistently, would have had better access to food. They would have survived and reproduced more successfully. And so, gradually, sleep was pared back, reduced to the bare minimum necessary for survival. But sleep isn't just about time. It's also regulated by light. In most animals, a master clock in the brain tracks the cycle of day and night, using light signals detected by the eyes to synchronize the body's internal rhythms. This clock governs not just sleep, but also hormone release, body temperature, digestion, and a host of other processes. It's one of the fundamental organizing principles of biology. But in a cave, there is no light. The clock receives no input, and without that input, it begins to drift, to lose its structure, to become irrelevant. Researchers have found that cavefish have mutations in the genes that regulate circadian rhythm. These genes, with names like clock and period, are responsible for maintaining the biological clock's precision. In surface fish, they function normally, ticking along in sync with the Sunday. But in cavefish, these genes are often broken or altered, their function diminished. The result is a clock that runs erratically or not at all. The fish no longer have a strong internal sense of when to sleep and when to wake. They've lost the timer that tells most animals it's time to rest. And, interestingly, they don't seem to suffer for it. The cavefish appear healthy, they navigate their environment successfully, they reproduce, their neurons function, their memories form. By all observable measures, they're doing fine on a fraction of the sleep that their surface relatives require. This suggests that at least in this specific environment, the benefits of sleep can be outweighed by the benefits of staying awake. It's not that sleep is useless, it's that, in the cost-benefit analysis of survival, the cavefish have found a different balance point. This has profound implications for our understanding of sleep. It suggests that sleep, while important, is not uniformly essential across all contexts. The amount of sleep an animal needs depends on its environment, its food sources, its predators, and its evolutionary history.
In a world of light and plenty, sleep makes sense. It's a time to rest, to repair, to consolidate memories without missing much.
But in a world of darkness and scarcity, where every moment might bring the only meal of the week, sleep becomes a luxury the animal can't afford. There's also evidence that the cavefish have compensatory mechanisms, ways of maintaining brain health despite chronic sleep restriction. Their neurons may be more efficient at clearing waste. Their metabolism may generate fewer of the toxins that normally accumulate during waking hours. Or perhaps their brains have simply adapted to function with less downtime, the way a well-designed machine might run longer between maintenance cycles. We don't yet understand all the details, but it's clear that the cavefish have undergone significant neurological changes to support their wakeful lifestyle. What's humbling about the cavefish is how quickly these changes occurred in evolutionary terms. Thousands of years, maybe tens of thousands, but not millions. That's a blink of an eye in the timeline of life on Earth. And in that brief span, these fish transformed from creatures with normal sleep patterns into something else, something that barely sleeps at all. It's a reminder that evolution doesn't need eons to reshape even fundamental aspects of biology when the selective pressure is strong enough. When the environment changes, life adapts, and sometimes adaptation means letting go of things we thought were essential. The blind cavefish drifts through the darkness, its sightless face turned toward currents that might carry the scent of food. It doesn't sleep much, and it doesn't need to. In its world, wakefulness is survival. And survival, in the end, is the only rule that truly matters. Picture the tallest land animal on Earth, its neck stretching up to 18 feet into the air, reaching leaves that no other herbivore can touch. The giraffe is an evolutionary marvel, a creature that has pushed the boundaries of mammalian anatomy to extraordinary extremes. But that extraordinary height comes with costs. And one of the most surprising costs is this: giraffes barely sleep at all. In the wild, they sleep for an average of only 30 minutes to 2 hours per day. 30 minutes. That's less time than you spend scrolling through your phone before bed, less time than a single REM cycle, less time than most mammals spend in just the deepest stage of sleep. If you were to watch a giraffe through the course of a full day and night, you'd see an animal that spends most of its time standing, walking slowly between acacia trees, browsing on leaves, chewing cud, occasionally interacting with other members of the herd. There are brief pauses, moments when the giraffe stands completely still, eyes half closed. But even these moments don't look like the deep rest you'd associate with sleep. The animal remains upright, weight distributed across all 4 legs, ready to move at the slightest sign of danger. This is standing rest, a state of reduced alertness that falls somewhere between full wakefulness and true sleep. True sleep, the kind where the giraffe actually lies down, is rare and fleeting. To sleep deeply, a giraffe must fold its impossibly long legs beneath its body and settle onto the ground, often curling its neck back so that its head rests on its hindquarters. It's an awkward position, one that takes time to get into and even more time to get out of. And time, for a giraffe, is a dangerous luxury. Lying down makes the animal vulnerable in ways that standing never does. A lion can cover ground quickly. A giraffe getting to its feet from a prone position cannot. The African savanna is not a forgiving place. It's home to some of the most efficient predators on the planet. Lions, leopards, hyenas, wild dogs. These hunters are opportunistic, always watching for weakness, for distraction, for that brief moment when prey lets its guard down. A giraffe lying on the ground is an invitation. It's a massive target, unable to flee, unable to defend itself effectively. Even the giraffe's primary defense, its powerful kick, is compromised when the animal is horizontal. So giraffes avoid lying down whenever possible, and when they must, they do so for only a few minutes at a time. Studies conducted on wild giraffes using motion-sensing collars and infrared cameras have revealed just how fragmented their sleep truly is. A giraffe might lie down for 5 minutes, enter a brief period of deep sleep, perhaps even REM sleep, and then immediately stand up again. This cycle repeats a handful of times throughout the night, but the total accumulated sleep rarely exceeds an hour. Some nights, especially in areas with high predator activity, the giraffes don't lie down at all. They remain standing, dozing lightly, snatching whatever rest they can without ever fully surrendering to unconsciousness. This is reminiscent of the polyphasic sleep strategies seen in some human cultures and historical periods, where sleep is broken into multiple short episodes rather than one long stretch. But even the most extreme human polyphasic sleepers still accumulate several hours of total sleep per day. Giraffes don't. They've compressed their sleep needs to a degree that would be catastrophic for a human. If you tried to survive on 30 minutes of sleep per night, you'd be non-functional within days. Your cognitive abilities would collapse. Your immune system would falter. You'd be a danger to yourself and others. And yet, giraffes manage not just to survive, but to thrive. How do they do it? The answer is still being investigated, but several factors seem to be at play. First, giraffes may simply be more efficient sleepers. The sleep they do get, brief as it is, may be higher quality, more restorative than the equivalent amount of sleep in other species. Their brains might clear metabolic waste more quickly, consolidate memories more efficiently, perform the essential maintenance tasks of sleep in a fraction of the time. It's as if they've optimized every aspect of the sleep process, streamlining it to fit within the narrow windows of safety their environment allows. Second, giraffes spend a significant amount of time ruminating, that is, chewing cud. Ruminants like giraffes, cows, and deer have complex digestive systems that require them to regurgitate partially digested food and chew it again. This process is slow, meditative, and seems to occur in a state of reduced alertness. Some researchers have speculated that rumination might serve a rest-like function, not true sleep, but a form of wakeful rest that allows the brain to recover without the animal becoming fully vulnerable. It's similar to the quiet wakefulness you might experience during meditation or gentle stretching, a state where the mind is calm and the body still, even though you are technically conscious. Third, giraffes may have adapted to function well on minimal sleep through changes in their neural architecture. Studies on other short-sleeping animals suggest that their neurons might be less prone to accumulating the damage that normally results from sleep deprivation. Their synapses might be structured differently, their glial cells more active in clearing waste, their neurotransmitter systems more resilient. These are subtle, molecular-level adaptations, but over evolutionary time, they can make the difference between an animal that collapses without 8 hours of sleep and one that thrives on 30 minutes. And it's worth noting that captive giraffes, living in zoos without predators, sleep more than their wild counterpart. In the safety of an enclosure where lions don't lurk and humans provide food, giraffes will lie down more frequently and sleep for longer stretches, sometimes up to 4 or 5 hours per night. This suggests that wild giraffes aren't incapable of longer sleep. They're choosing not to sleep, or rather, their instincts and their environment are making that choice for them. The capacity for sleep is there. The opportunity is not.
This is one of the most important lessons from studying giraffe sleep. The amount of sleep an animal gets is not just a biological constant.
It's a negotiation between internal needs and external pressures. Giraffes need sleep, but they need survival more. And when those two needs come into conflict, survival wins. Every time. The result is an animal that has learned to live on the edge of exhaustion, sleeping just enough to maintain basic function, but never enough to feel truly rested. At least, not in the way we would understand it. It's a sobering reminder of the privilege of safety. You can afford to sleep for 7 or 8 hours because you live in a world with locks on doors, with roofs overhead, with no predators stalking through the night. The giraffe has no such luxury. Its height, its strength, its acute vision, all of these are survival tools. But none of them allow it the one thing you take for granted every night: the ability to close your eyes, let go, and trust that you'll wake up unharmed. The giraffe stands through the darkness, eyes half open, chewing slowly, dreaming only in fragments. If giraffes are impressive for sleeping so little despite their vulnerability, then elephants take that feat even further. These are the largest land animals on Earth, creatures of profound intelligence, deep social bonds, and complex emotional lives. They recognize themselves in mirrors, mourn their dead, and remember the locations of water sources across vast distances and many years. Their brains are among the largest and most sophisticated in the animal kingdom, and yet wild elephants sleep for an average of only 2 hours per night. 2 hours. Some nights they don't enter REM sleep at all. They simply stand, rest lightly, and keep moving through the darkness. This discovery came as a shock to researchers. For years, elephant sleep was studied primarily in captivity, where the animals had access to safe enclosures, regular feeding schedules, and no predators. Captive elephants sleep more than their wild cousins, sometimes 4 to 6 hours per night, lying down comfortably on soft ground. Scientists assumed this was normal elephant behavior. But when researchers finally managed to track wild elephants using GPS collars and activity monitors, a very different picture emerged. In the wild, elephants are nearly perpetual wanderers, covering distances of up to 30 kilometers in a single day, sometimes more, always searching for food and water in landscapes that shift with the seasons. Sleep, for a wild elephant, is a rare luxury. The animal might pause in the late night or early morning hours, standing in place, trunk relaxed, ears still. This is standing rest, a light doze where the elephant remains upright and aware enough to respond to threat. Occasionally, the elephant will lie down on its side, a position that allows for deeper sleep, possibly even REM. But these lying episodes are brief, often lasting only 30 minutes to an hour before the elephant rises again and continues its journey. Over the course of several days, researchers observed elephants going entirely without REM sleep, then catching up with a longer rest period when conditions allowed. Why do elephants sleep so little? The answer, as with giraffes, comes down to survival pressures, but the specifics are different. Elephants are not as vulnerable to predation as giraffes. An adult elephant has few natural predators. Lions occasionally target calves or weak individuals, but a healthy adult is essentially untouchable. The bigger threat to elephant survival is not being eaten. It's starvation. Elephants are enormous, and that size demands constant fueling. An adult elephant needs to consume roughly 200 to 300 kilograms of vegetation every single day. That's a staggering amount of food, and in many habitats, it's not easy to find. The elephant's diet consists mostly of grasses, leaves, bark, and fruit, all relatively low in calories compared to the animal's massive energy expenditure. An elephant can spend up to 18 hours a day feeding, using its trunk to strip leaves from branches, tear bark from trees, and pull grass from the ground. This constant foraging leaves little time for sleep. If an elephant were to sleep for 8 hours like a human, it would miss a significant portion of its feeding window, and over time, that deficit would add up. The animal would lose weight, weaken, and eventually die. So sleep is sacrificed, compressed into the smallest possible space, to make room for the relentless demands of feeding. There's also the issue of water. Elephants need to drink daily, sometimes up to 200 liters in a single session. In dry seasons or arid regions, water sources can be far apart, requiring long treks across open terrain. An elephant cannot afford to sleep deeply in the middle of a migration to water. It must keep moving, keep navigating, keep the herd together. Sleep happens in stolen moments, brief pauses in the march, never long enough to truly rest, but just enough to keep the brain functional. And then there's the social dimension. Elephants are deeply social animals. They live in matriarchal herds, led by the oldest and most experienced female, who makes decisions about where to go, when to rest, and how to respond to danger. The matriarch's knowledge is critical to the herd's survival. She remembers droughts from decades past, knows where the hidden water sources are, and can read the landscape in ways that younger elephants cannot. But this leadership role comes with a cost. The matriarch often sleeps even less than other herd members, remaining vigilant, always listening, always ready to respond. Her sleep is fragmented by the needs of the group, by the movements of calves, by the distant sound of a potential threat. Researchers have found that elephants do show a rebound effect after periods of especially short sleep. If an elephant goes several nights with minimal rest, it will eventually take a longer sleep session, lying down for a few hours and entering deeper sleep stages. This suggests that elephants, like other mammals, accumulate sleep debt and must eventually pay it back. But unlike humans, who become impaired quickly without adequate sleep, elephants seem able to tolerate large sleep debts without obvious cognitive or physical decline. They continue to navigate complex social hierarchies, remember vast mental maps, and make sophisticated decisions about resource allocation. How do they manage this? The answer likely lies in the structure of their brains. Elephant brains are not just large, they're also highly specialized. The hippocampus, the region involved in memory, is exceptionally well developed. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for decision-making and social cognition, is complex and densely packed with neurons. It's possible that these brain structures are more efficient than those of other mammals, requiring less downtime to maintain function. Or perhaps elephants have evolved mechanisms for clearing neural waste and performing cellular maintenance without needing the long, uninterrupted sleep that humans rely on. There's also evidence that elephants may engage in microsleeps, brief episodes of sleep lasting only a few seconds, similar to those seen in sleep-deprived humans or migrating birds. These microsleeps might occur while the elephant is walking, its body moving automatically while parts of the brain briefly shut down. It's a risky strategy, potentially leading to stumbles or disorientation, but in an environment where stopping means falling behind the herd or missing a feeding opportunity, it may be the only option. What's most striking about elephant sleep is what it reveals about the relationship between brain size, intelligence, and sleep need. For decades, scientists believed that larger, more complex brains required more sleep. After all, there's more neural tissue to maintain, more synapses to strengthen, more waste to clear. But elephants defy this assumption. They have some of the largest and most intelligent brains on the planet, and yet they sleep less than almost any other mammal. This suggests that sleep need is not simply a function of brain size. It's influenced by ecological pressures, dietary demands, social structures, and evolutionary history. Intelligence and sleep are related, but not in the straightforward way we once thought. The elephant walks through the night, ears flapping gently to cool its massive body, trunk swaying as it pulls at vegetation. Somewhere in that enormous brain, memories are being stored, decisions are being weighed, social bonds are being maintained, all on 2 hours of sleep. It's a testament to the flexibility of biology, to the way evolution sculpts even the most fundamental processes to fit the demands of survival. The elephant doesn't need 8 hours. It never has. And in its wakefulness, it has found a different kind of rest, one measured not in hours, but in resilience. The walrus is a creature of extremes. It lives at the edge of the Arctic, in one of the harshest environments on Earth, where the ocean freezes solid for months at a time and the air temperature can plunge to 40 below zero. It's a massive animal, weighing up to 2,000 kilograms, with thick blubber, long ivory tusks, and sensitive whiskers that help it find food in the murky depths. And when it comes to sleep, the walrus has developed one of the most flexible strategies in the animal kingdom. It can sleep on land, on ice, in the water, and even underwater, adapting its rest to whatever the environment demands. When a walrus sleeps on land or ice, it looks almost comical. These enormous animals pile together in dense groups, sometimes hundreds of individuals packed so tightly that they're lying on top of one another. The warmth of their bodies combines, creating a collective heat that helps them survive the Arctic cold. In this position, walruses can sleep deeply, entering slow-wave sleep and even REM sleep, much like other mammals. They might snore, twitch, or shift position, but they're essentially safe. There are no predators on the ice floes that can threaten a full-grown walrus, and the animals can afford to let their guard down. But walruses don't always have access to solid ground. Much of their life is spent in the water, diving to the ocean floor to feed on clams, mussels, and other bottom-dwelling invertebrates. These dives can last up to 30 minutes, with the walrus descending to depths of over 100 meters. During these feeding sessions, sleep is impossible. The animal is active, using its whiskers to probe the sediment, its powerful suction to extract shellfish, its flippers to maneuver in the dark water. But once the feeding is done, once the walrus has eaten its fill, it faces a problem. It needs to rest. But it's far from shore, surrounded by water, and it still needs to breathe. This is where the walrus's flexibility comes into play. When resting at sea, a walrus can inflate pharyngeal pouches, large sacs of tissue in its throat that fill with air and act like built-in flotation devices. These pouches allow the walrus to float vertically in the water, head above the surface, body dangling below, bobbing gently with the waves. In this position, the walrus can sleep while still breathing normally. It's an elegant solution, turning the animal into its own life raft, allowing rest without the need to swim or find solid ground. But the walrus has another trick, one that's even more remarkable. It can sleep underwater, not for long periods, not for hours at a time, but for brief intervals that correspond to the length of time it can hold its breath. A walrus will sink to the ocean floor, settle onto the sediment, and enter a light sleep while its body remains submerged. During this time, its heart rate slows dramatically, sometimes dropping to as low as 3 to 5 beats per minute, a state of profound bradycardia that conserves oxygen. The animal's metabolism shifts into a low-energy mode, stretching its oxygen reserves as far as possible. This underwater sleep can last for several minutes, after which the walrus wakes, rises to the surface, takes a breath, and may immediately dive back down to continue resting. It's a fragmented, interrupted form of sleep, but it allows the walrus to rest even in the middle of the ocean, far from any ice or land. The ability to sleep underwater is rare among mammals. Seals and sea lions can do it to some extent, but walruses have refined the technique, using it as a regular part of their rest strategy. And like dolphins, walruses are capable of unihemispheric sleep, resting one half of the brain while keeping the other half alert. This is particularly useful when the animal is floating at the surface or resting in a group where vigilance is still necessary. One eye remains open, tracking movement in the water, while the other closes. One hemisphere generates the slow waves of deep sleep, while the other maintains a baseline level of awareness. It's the same strategy dolphins use, adapted here to the specific needs of a semi-aquatic Arctic mammal. What makes the walrus so fascinating is not just that it uses multiple sleep strategies, but that it switches between them seamlessly depending on context. On ice, it sleeps deeply with both hemispheres. In the water, it may use unihemispheric sleep while floating, or bilateral sleep while submerged. The animal doesn't have one fixed way of resting. It has a toolkit, a repertoire of options that it selects from based on where it is, how safe it feels, and what its body needs at that moment. This flexibility is a hallmark of highly adaptable species, animals that can survive in environments where conditions change rapidly and unpredictably. The Arctic is such an environment. Ice forms and melts with the seasons. Storms blow in suddenly, breaking apart flows and scattering herds. Food sources shift as the ocean currents change. A walrus that could only sleep in one specific way, that required perfect conditions to rest, would be at a severe disadvantage. But a walrus that can sleep on land, on ice, in the water or underwater, that can rest with one brain hemisphere or both, that can adjust its sleep to match the demands of the moment, is far more likely to survive and reproduce. This adaptability also speaks to the fundamental nature of sleep. We often think of sleep as a rigid state, something that happens in a particular way at a particular time. You lie down in bed, close your eyes, and spend the next 7 or 8 hours unconscious. But that's just one version of sleep, the version that works for humans living in stable, safe environments. For animals like the walrus, living at the edge of survival in a constantly shifting world, sleep cannot be rigid. It must be flexible, modular, capable of being shaped and reshaped to fit the circumstances. Researchers studying walrus sleep have noted that the animals show clear signs of sleep debt when they're forced to remain at sea for extended periods. After days without access to ice, when walruses finally reach solid ground, they sleep longer and deeper, making up for the fragmented rest they accumulated while floating. This tells us that even with all their flexibility, walruses still need substantial amounts of quality sleep. The underwater naps and floating dozes are not replacements for true rest. They're stopgaps, temporary measures that allow the animal to keep going until it can find a safe place to truly recover. And there's something almost human about that. We do the same thing in our own way. When life demands it, when circumstances don't allow for proper rest, we cobble together whatever sleep we can. We nap on trains, doze in waiting rooms, catch a few minutes of rest wherever and however we can. It's not ideal, it's not restorative, but it gets us through. And when we finally have the chance, when we reach our own version of solid ice, we collapse and sleep deeply, paying back the debt we've accumulated. The walrus, floating in dark Arctic water with one eye closed and one eye watching the depths below, understands this better than most. If you've ever felt envious of people who seem to need very little sleep, who bounce out of bed after 5 hours and claim to feel completely refreshed, then the fruit fly might be your new hero, or perhaps your nemesis, depending on how you look at it. Because hidden in the genetics of this tiny insect, barely larger than a grain of rice, are clues to one of the most fundamental questions in sleep research. What if you could genetically engineer away the need for sleep? What if rest, that seemingly non-negotiable requirement, could be reduced or even eliminated through a simple mutation? The common fruit fly, Drosophila melanogaster, has been a workhorse of genetic research for over a century. Its short life cycle, simple care requirements, and well-mapped genome make it ideal for studying how genes influence behavior. And yes, fruit flies sleep. They show all the hallmarks: periods of inactivity, reduced responsiveness to stimuli, a preferred resting location, and a rebound effect when deprived of rest. When you keep a fruit fly awake by gently shaking its container or disturbing it with light, it will sleep longer the next day to compensate. Sleep in flies is regulated, necessary, and surprisingly similar to sleep in mammals, at least in its basic functions. But not all fruit flies sleep the same amount. In the late 1990s, researchers began screening thousands of flies looking for mutants with unusual sleep patterns. What they found was astonishing. Some flies carried mutations in specific genes that dramatically reduced their need for sleep. These mutant flies slept for only a few hours per day, sometimes as little as 2 or 3 hours, compared to the 12 to 15 hours that normal fruit flies typically sleep. And the most remarkable part? The mutant flies appeared perfectly healthy. They lived as long as normal flies. They were just as active, just as capable of learning and memory tasks. They seemed to have bypassed the need for sleep without suffering any obvious consequences. One of the most studied of these mutants involves a gene called shaker, which codes for a potassium channel in neurons. Potassium channels help regulate the electrical activity of brain cells, controlling when neurons fire and when they rest. Flies with mutations in the shaker gene have hyperactive neurons, cells that fire more frequently and with less inhibition. These flies are awake more, sleep less, and don't seem to need the recovery time that normal flies do. It's as if their brains are running on a more efficient operating system, one that doesn't require as much downtime to maintain function. Another gene, called insomniac, also plays a crucial role. Flies with mutations in this gene sleep even less than Shaker mutants, sometimes as little as 1 to 2 hours per day. The insomniac gene is involved in regulating the proteins that build up in neurons during waking hours, the metabolic byproducts that normally signal the brain it's time to rest. Mutant flies seem to handle these waste products differently, either producing less of them or clearing them more efficiently, allowing the brain to stay awake longer without accumulating damage. These discoveries have profound implications. They suggest that sleep, while important, is not a monolithic requirement. It's not that every animal needs exactly 8 hours or 12 hours or any specific amount. What matters is the balance between the wear and tear of waking activity and the restorative processes that occur during sleep. If you can reduce the wear and tear or increase the efficiency of restoration, you can reduce the amount of sleep needed. The fruit fly mutants haven't eliminated the need for rest. They've simply shifted the equation, finding a genetic shortcut that lets them function with less. But before you start dreaming of a future where humans carry insomniac mutations and sleep only 2 hours a night, there's an important caveat. These fruit fly mutants may appear healthy under laboratory conditions, but lab conditions are not the real world. In the lab, flies are protected from predators, provided with abundant food, kept at stable temperatures. They don't face the stresses and challenges that wild flies encounter. Some studies suggest that under more demanding conditions, short-sleeping mutants do show deficits. They're more vulnerable to stress, less able to recover from injury, and may have shorter lifespans when pushed. Sleep reduction, even when genetically supported, still comes with trade-offs. There's also the question of whether findings in fruit flies translate to mammals. Fruit fly brains are vastly simpler than mammalian brains. They have around 100,000 neurons compared to the 86 billion in a human brain. The complexity of human cognition, emotion, and memory may require sleep in ways that a fruit fly's simpler nervous system does not. Genes like Shaker and insomniac have mammalian equivalents, and researchers have begun exploring whether similar mutations exist in humans who naturally sleep very little. Some rare individuals, often called short sleepers, claim to feel fully rested on 4 or 5 hours of sleep per night. Genetic studies have identified mutations in genes like DEC2 and ADRB1 in some of these individuals, suggesting that human sleep need may indeed have a genetic component. But even among human short sleepers, the reduction is modest. We're talking about needing 6 hours instead of 8, not 2 hours instead of 12. And many people who claim to be short sleepers are actually chronically sleep deprived, functioning at reduced capacity without realizing it. True genetic short sleepers, who thrive on minimal sleep with no apparent health consequences, are extremely rare. The fruit fly mutants, thriving on 2 hours of sleep in a controlled lab, remain an outlier, a tantalizing glimpse of what might be possible, but not yet a roadmap for human application. What the fruit fly research does offer is insight into the molecular mechanisms of sleep. By studying which genes affect sleep and how they do it, scientists are beginning to understand what sleep actually does at the cellular level. It's not just one thing. Sleep involves waste clearance, synaptic pruning, protein synthesis, hormone regulation, and immune function, among other processes. Different genes influence different aspects of this complex system. Some affect how quickly waste accumulates. Others influence how efficiently the brain clears it. Still, others regulate the sensitivity of neurons to sleep-inducing signals. Sleep, it turns out, is not controlled by a single master switch, but by a network of genes working in concert. This complexity is both encouraging and humbling. Encouraging because it suggests that sleep is malleable, that with enough understanding, we might one day be able to optimize our own sleep, reducing the time needed while maintaining full cognitive function. Humbling because it reminds us that sleep is deeply woven into the fabric of life, not easily disentangled or discarded. The fruit fly mutants are extraordinary, but they're still flies. They still sleep, even if only briefly. They haven't escaped the need for rest. They've simply found a way to meet that need more efficiently. And perhaps that's the real lesson here. Sleep is not a weakness to be overcome or an evolutionary mistake to be corrected. It's a solution, refined over hundreds of millions of years, to the problem of maintaining a functioning brain in a body that must also eat, move, reproduce, and survive. The fruit fly, with its mutant genes and abbreviated sleep, is still solving the same problem. It's just using a different equation. And the answer, for now at least, is still the same. Rest, in some form, is non-negotiable. We've traveled through the animal kingdom, meeting creatures that sleep with half their brain, that rest in seconds while flying, that go weeks without closing their eyes. We've seen dolphins and sharks, giraffes and elephants, walruses and fruit flies, all bending the rules of sleep in ways that seem to defy everything we know about biology. But now it's time to return to the fundamental question we started with. If all these animals can survive with so little sleep, or such strange sleep, does that mean sleep isn't really necessary after all? The answer, perhaps disappointingly, is no. Sleep is necessary. Deeply, profoundly, non-negotiably necessary, even for the animals that seem to escape it. Let's start with what happens when normal animals that haven't evolved special adaptations, are deprived of sleep. The results are consistent and devastating across species. Rats die within 2 to 3 weeks. Fruit flies show cognitive impairment and shortened lifespans. Humans develop severe physical and mental deterioration. The body begins to break down at every level. Immune function collapses, leaving the animal vulnerable to infection. Temperature regulation fails, causing wild fluctuations that the body can't compensate for. Metabolism becomes dysregulated, leading to weight loss despite adequate food intake. The brain stops clearing waste effectively, allowing toxic proteins to accumulate in neurons. Memory formation fails, decision-making deteriorates. Eventually, the animal dies, not from exhaustion in the traditional sense, but from systemic failure. This tells us that sleep isn't optional. It's not a habit or a preference. It's a biological necessity, as fundamental as breathing or eating. The animals we've been discussing, the ones that seem to sleep so little, haven't escaped this necessity. They've simply found ways to meet it under extreme constraints. They've negotiated, compromised, and adapted, but they're still paying the price. They're still resting, even if that rest looks nothing like the sleep you experience. Consider the dolphins again. Yes, they sleep with one hemisphere at a time, allowing them to swim and breathe continuously. But they're still sleeping. Half the brain is offline at any given moment, generating slow waves, clearing metabolic waste, consolidating memories. The fact that they split this process between hemispheres doesn't mean they've bypassed it. It means they've distributed it differently. And when researchers look closely, they find that dolphins do show signs of sleep deprivation if their rest is disrupted. They become less coordinated, less responsive, less able to perform complex tasks. The need for rest is still there, lurking beneath the surface. The migratory birds that sleep in flight are even more telling. They accumulate massive sleep debt during their journeys, surviving on microsleeps and brief moments of reduced consciousness. But when they finally reach land, they crash. They sleep deeply and voraciously, making up for lost time. The debt must be paid. The body will not be denied indefinitely. What looked like an escape from sleep was actually a deferral, a biological loan that comes due with interest. Even the newborn orcas, those remarkable calves that swim without sleep for a full month, eventually begin sleeping. Their brains, it seems, can tolerate the deprivation only during that specific window of early development. Once that window closes, sleep returns, and it returns with urgency. The calf needs rest, and the body knows it. The month of wakefulness wasn't a demonstration that sleep is unnecessary. It was a demonstration of how far the body can be pushed when survival demands it, and how quickly it returns to normal patterns once the pressure eases. What about the animals that seem healthiest on minimal sleep, like the cavefish or the fruit fly mutants? Even they show signs of needing rest. The cavefish may sleep only 2 hours a day, but those 2 hours are still sleep. The brain still shows the electrical signatures of rest. The body still reduces its activity. And in controlled experiments, when cavefish are kept awake beyond their minimal sleep, they show impairment. They're more sluggish, less coordinated, slower to respond. They've reduced their sleep need, but they haven't eliminated it. The same is true for fruit fly mutants. They sleep less, but they still sleep. And under stressful conditions, their reduced sleep becomes a liability. So what is it about sleep that makes it so essential? Why can't evolution simply eliminate it, freeing animals from the vulnerability and lost time that sleep represents? The answer lies in what sleep actually does, the biological processes that occur only, or most effectively, during rest. First, there's waste clearance. During waking hours, neurons burn energy, produce metabolic byproducts, and accumulate proteins like beta amyloid and tau. If these aren't cleared regularly, they build up, forming plaques and tangles that damage brain cells. Sleep activates the glymphatic system, a network of channels that flushes cerebrospinal fluid through the brain, washing away these toxins. Without sleep, the brain slowly drowns in its own waste. Second, there's synaptic homeostasis. When you're awake, learning and experiencing the world, your neurons form new connections, strengthening some synapses and creating others. This is essential for memory and adaptation, but it's also energetically expensive and can lead to a brain that's overly excitable, prone to seizures or runaway activity. During sleep, particularly deep sleep, the brain prunes unnecessary connections, weakening synapses that aren't important and consolidating the ones that are. This process resets the brain, preparing it for another day of learning without becoming overwhelmed by information. Third, there's immune function. Sleep is when the body produces many of the cytokines and immune cells that fight infection and inflammation. People who don't sleep enough are more susceptible to illness, take longer to recover from injuries, and show higher levels of chronic inflammation. Sleep is when the immune system does its most intensive work, patrolling for pathogens, repairing damaged tissues, and maintaining the body's defenses. Fourth, there's memory consolidation. During sleep, particularly REM sleep, the brain replays the day's experiences, transferring information from short-term to long-term storage, integrating new knowledge with existing frameworks, and even solving problems that seemed intractable while awake. This is why you sometimes wake up with solutions to problems you couldn't solve the night before. Your sleeping brain was working on them, making connections that your waking mind missed. All of these processes are essential for survival. An animal that doesn't clear neural waste will develop neurodegeneration. An animal that doesn't prune synapses will have an inefficient, overstimulated brain. An animal that doesn't support its immune system will succumb to infection. An animal that doesn't consolidate memories will fail to learn from experience. Sleep isn't one thing. It's a collection of vital maintenance tasks that the body performs most effectively when the animal isn't busy doing other things. And this is why sleep has persisted across evolution, why even the most extreme adaptations still preserve some form of rest. The animals we've studied haven't escaped sleep. They've simply become very, very good at getting the minimum amount they can survive on, or at distributing it in creative ways that allow them to meet other survival needs simultaneously. They're living on the edge, balancing the necessity of rest against the demands of their environment. And that balance, precarious as it is, confirms rather than contradicts the importance of sleep. Because if sleep weren't essential, if it served no vital function, evolution would have eliminated it entirely. The fact that it persists in every animal ever studied tells us everything we need to know. Sleep isn't optional. It's life. So where does all of this leave you? You're not a dolphin. You can't sleep with half your brain while the other half stays awake. You're not a frigate bird, stealing seconds of rest while soaring over the ocean. You're not a newborn orca, capable of going weeks without sleep during a critical developmental window. You're human, and your relationship with sleep is both simpler and more complicated than any of the animals we've discussed. Simpler because you don't face the same extreme survival pressures. More complicated because you live in a world that constantly asks you to sacrifice sleep for productivity, connection, entertainment, and 1,000 other demands that didn't exist for most of human history. Humans are what scientists call obligate sleepers. We must sleep fully and regularly, or we suffer profound consequences. Unlike dolphins, we can't split our sleep between brain hemispheres. Our brains are wired for bilateral sleep, both sides shutting down together, entering the same stages simultaneously. There's no mechanism for keeping one side awake while the other rests. If you try to stay awake indefinitely, your brain will eventually force the issue through microsleeps, those brief moments of unconsciousness that occur even when you're trying desperately to stay alert. Your body has override switches, and it will use them. The human sleep requirement is surprisingly rigid. Most adults need between 7 and 9 hours of sleep per night for optimal health and function. Some people genuinely need a bit less, perhaps 6 hours, and some need more, closer to 10. But these are variations on a theme, not exceptions to the rule. The people who claim to thrive on 4 or 5 hours of sleep per night are, in the vast majority of cases, chronically sleep-deprived without realizing it. They've adapted to functioning at reduced capacity, mistaking habituation for health. Studies show that people who restrict their sleep to 6 hours or less for extended periods show cognitive impairments equivalent to being legally drunk, even though they self-report feeling fine. The brain adapts to exhaustion by lowering its baseline, and you lose the ability to accurately judge your own impairment. There are rare individuals, perhaps less than 1% of the population, who carry genetic mutations similar to those found in short-sleeping fruit flies. These people genuinely need less sleep, functioning perfectly well on 4 to 6 hours per night with no apparent health consequences. Researchers have identified several genes involved, including DEC2 and ADRB1, which affect how the brain regulates sleep pressure and responds to adenosine, a chemical that builds up during waking hours and signals the need for rest. But these are genetic outliers, and their existence doesn't change the reality for the other 99% of humanity. For most of us, sleep deprivation is cumulative, damaging, and unavoidable without adequate rest. So if you can't biologically become a short sleeper, what can you learn from the animals we've studied? The first lesson is about efficiency. Many of the animals that sleep less do so, not because they need less rest, but because they've optimized the rest they do get. Their sleep is higher quality, more restorative per minute than the fragmented, interrupted sleep many humans experience. You can't reduce your total sleep need, but you can improve sleep quality by protecting your sleep environment, maintaining consistent sleep schedules, and addressing factors that disrupt rest, like light pollution, noise, stress, and alcohol. The second lesson is about flexibility within constraints. Walruses sleep differently depending on their environment, switching between deep bilateral sleep on ice and lighter unihemispheric sleep in the water. While you can't split your hemispheres, you can adapt your sleep patterns to your circumstances. If you're traveling across time zones, napping strategically can help bridge the gap. If you're dealing with a newborn, short sleep cycles become necessary, and understanding that this is temporary, that sleep debt will eventually be repaid, can reduce the psychological burden. Flexibility doesn't mean sleeping less overall. It means being strategic about when and how you sleep. The third lesson is about recognizing trade-offs. Giraffes sleep little because they must constantly feed. Elephants sacrifice rest for migration. Sharks must swim to breathe. Every animal that sleeps less than optimal pays a price, even if that price isn't immediately visible. In your own life, when you sacrifice sleep for work, social obligations, or screen time, you're making a similar trade-off. Sometimes those trade-offs are necessary. Sometimes they're worth it, but they're never free. Understanding this helps you make more informed decisions about when to prioritize sleep and when other needs genuinely take precedence. The fourth lesson is about the universality of sleep's functions. Every animal, no matter how it sleeps, is performing the same basic maintenance, clearing neural waste, consolidating memories, regulating metabolism, supporting immune function. You can't skip these processes, but you can support them by creating conditions that allow them to happen efficiently. This means darkness at night to support melatonin production. It means quiet to allow deep sleep stages. It means managing stress, which can fragment sleep and reduce its restorative quality. The animals that survive on minimal sleep aren't skipping maintenance. They're doing it under time pressure, and you can see the costs when you look closely enough. Perhaps the most important lesson is about acceptance. You are not designed to be sleepless. Your evolutionary history is different from that of dolphins, sharks, and birds. You evolved as a diurnal primate, sleeping deeply at night in relative safety, protected by fire, shelter, and social groups. Your brain expects this pattern and functions best within it. Fighting against your biology, trying to become something you're not, leads to suffering. But working within your biology, understanding its needs and meeting them, leads to better health, clearer thinking, and a more resilient body. This doesn't mean you can't be strategic about sleep. Research into sleep optimization, circadian rhythm management, and even pharmacological interventions continues to advance. Scientists are exploring ways to make sleep more efficient, to enhance the restorative processes that occur during rest, to help people who struggle with sleep disorders. Some of this research is inspired directly by studying animals with unusual sleep patterns. If we can understand how a dolphin's brain clears waste while only half of it sleeps, maybe we can find ways to enhance waste clearance in human brains. If we can figure out why fruit fly mutants need less sleep without suffering damage, maybe we can develop interventions that allow humans to sleep more efficiently, needing less total time for the same restoration. But these possibilities remain in the future. For now, you're working with the biology you have. And that biology, shaped by millions of years of evolution, requires sleep, not as much as a bat, which sleeps 20 hours a day. Not as little as a giraffe, which sleeps 2, but somewhere in between, in a range that feels reasonable even if modern life makes it hard to achieve. The animals we've studied show us that sleep is flexible, that it can be shaped by necessity, that evolution finds remarkable solutions to impossible problems. But they also show us that sleep, in some form, is always necessary. Always. And that's not a limitation. It's a reminder that rest is part of being alive. We began tonight with a dolphin, swimming through dark water, half asleep and half awake, existing in a state that seems impossible to us. And now, after traveling through oceans and skies, caves and savannas, after meeting creatures that sleep in seconds, in fragments, or barely at all, we return to that same image. The dolphin is still there, still moving, still breathing, still resting in its own peculiar way. And perhaps now, after everything we've explored, that image means something different. It's no longer just strange. It's a testament to the flexibility of life, to the way evolution sculpts even the most fundamental processes to fit the demands of survival. Sleep, we've learned, is not one thing. It's a spectrum of biological states, a collection of strategies that animals use to meet the universal need for rest while also meeting the specific demands of their environment. Some animals sleep with one hemisphere at a time, keeping half their consciousness active while the other half recovers. Some sleep in microseconds, stealing rest in fragments so brief you'd barely notice them. Some minimize sleep to near extinction, compressing hours into minutes, living on the edge of exhaustion because their world offers no alternative. And some, like you, sleep deeply and completely, surrendering consciousness for hours at a time because your environment is safe enough and your biology demands it. But beneath all this diversity, beneath all the strange adaptations and remarkable compromises, there's a common thread. Every animal needs some form of rest. Every brain requires maintenance. Every body accumulates waste that must be cleared, damage that must be repaired, memories that must be consolidated. The form that rest takes can vary wildly, but the need for it remains constant. Sleep is universal, not because it looks the same everywhere, but because the problems it solves are universal. Neurons produce metabolic waste. Synapses need pruning. Immune systems require downtime. These are facts of biology that no species, no matter how well adapted, can escape entirely. And this brings us back to you, lying here in the darkness, perhaps drifting towards sleep or perhaps still awake, mind wandering through the stories we've shared. You are not a dolphin, and you will never sleep like one. You are not a frigate bird, and you will never rest while flying. You are human, with a human brain and human needs, and that means you require real, substantial, uninterrupted sleep. Not as a luxury, not as a sign of weakness, but as a biological necessity, as fundamental as eating or breathing. This is not a flaw in your design. It's a feature carefully preserved by evolution because it works. The animals we've studied tonight show us the boundaries of what's possible. They reveal how far sleep can be compressed, fragmented, or reshaped when survival demands it. But they also reveal the limits of those adaptations. The dolphin still sleeps, just with half its brain. The bird still accumulates sleep debt and must eventually repay it. The giraffe still closes its eyes for a few precious minutes when it feels safe enough. The elephant still lies down occasionally, surrendering to the need for deeper rest. No animal has truly escaped sleep. They've only negotiated with it, found ways to meet its demands under impossible circumstances, and even then, they pay a price. This should be reassuring. It means you're not broken when you need 8 hours of sleep. You're not lazy when you struggle after a poor night's rest. You're not failing when sleep deprivation makes you foggy, irritable, and slow. You're simply human, subject to the same biological laws that govern every other creature on Earth. And unlike many of those creatures, you have the luxury of safety, of shelter, of environments where deep sleep is possible. You can afford to be unconscious for hours at a time because you're not swimming through an ocean where stopping means drowning. You're not standing on a savanna where closing your eyes means becoming prey. You're here, in this moment, in a place where rest is not just possible but expected. The mystery we started with, how some animals survive without sleep, has an answer now. They don't, really. They survive with different kinds of sleep, with minimal sleep, with sleep so strange and fragmented that it barely resembles what you experience. But they still sleep. They still rest. They still bow to the same biological necessities that you do. The difference is not in the necessity, but in the form, in the creative ways that life has found to meet an unchangeable need under changeable circumstances. And that creativity, that endless capacity for adaptation, is what makes the story of sleep so fascinating. Because sleep is not a weakness to overcome. It's a solution, refined over hundreds of millions of years, to the problem of maintaining a living, thinking, feeling body in a universe that constantly generates entropy. Your brain produces waste. Sleep clears it. Your synapses become overstimulated. Sleep prunes them. Your memories remain scattered. Sleep consolidates them. Your immune system needs support. Sleep provides it. These processes are not optional extras that some lucky animals have evolved past. They are the price of consciousness, the cost of having a complex nervous system that allows you to think, learn, remember, and imagine. And that price must be paid, whether you're a human, a dolphin, or a fruit fly. The only question is how. So, tonight, as you finally let go, as your breathing slows and your thoughts begin to scatter and dissolve, know that you're participating in something ancient and universal. You're doing what every animal with a brain must do, in one form or another. You're resting, you're recovering, you're preparing for another day of being alive. And maybe, in your dreams, you'll swim like a dolphin with one eye closed, or soar like a frigate bird catching sleep in seconds, or stand like a giraffe watching the horizon for danger. But when you wake, you'll be human again, fully rested in the way that only humans can be, both hemispheres restored, both eyes opening together, ready to face the world with a clarity that only true sleep can provide. The dolphin swims on through the night, half dreaming, half aware. The bird glides above the waves, stealing moments of rest between wing beats. The elephant stands under distant stars, eyes heavy but open. And you, here in the quiet darkness, are finally letting yourself sink into the sleep you've needed all along. Not because you're weak, but because you're alive. And being alive means sometimes surrendering, letting the body do what it knows how to do, trusting that rest is not an interruption of life, but an essential part of it. Sleep well, knowing that even in your rest, you're part of a story that stretches across millions of years and countless species. A story that says, yes, sleep is strange. Yes, it's vulnerable. Yes, it costs time. But it's also necessary, beautiful, and undeniably, wonderfully universal. Good night. We started tonight with a simple question, one that might have seemed almost unfair if you've been lying here struggling with your own sleep. How do some animals survive without it? While you toss and turn, while you watch the clock and calculate how many hours you have left before morning? There are creatures out in the world that seem to mock the very concept of rest. Dolphins swimming endlessly through dark water, birds crossing oceans without landing, newborn whales that don't close their eyes for weeks. It seemed impossible, almost cruel in its implication that maybe, just maybe, sleep isn't as essential as you've been told. But now, after our journey through the strange and beautiful world of animal sleep, you know the truth. Those animals aren't surviving without sleep. They're surviving with sleep that's been stretched, compressed, fragmented, and reshaped by the relentless demands of their environments. The dolphin still sleeps, just with half its brain at a time. The bird still accumulates a debt that must eventually be paid. The whale calf eventually closes its eyes and rests like every other mammal. Sleep hasn't been eliminated in these creatures. It's been negotiated, bargained with, reduced to its absolute minimum, but it's still there, lurking beneath every adaptation, every strange strategy, every remarkable compromise. Because sleep, in the end, is non-negotiable. This matters for you in ways that go beyond fascinating biology. It matters because we live in a culture that often treats sleep as optional, as something to be sacrificed for productivity, success, connection, or entertainment. You've probably heard the stories about CEOs who brag about sleeping 4 hours a night, athletes who claim rest is for the weak, entrepreneurs who frame sleep as a luxury they can't afford. And maybe, somewhere in the back of your mind, you've wondered if you're weak for needing more, if there's something wrong with you for feeling exhausted after a bad night, if you should be pushing harder, sleeping less, doing more. But the animals we've met tonight tell a different story. They tell us that every attempt to reduce sleep comes with a cost, even when that attempt is supported by millions of years of evolution. The giraffe that sleeps 30 minutes a night is constantly vigilant, constantly vulnerable, living in a state of perpetual low-level stress. The elephant that sleeps 2 hours is driven by hunger, forced to choose between rest and survival. The shark that never stops swimming is trapped by its own physiology, unable to ever fully let go. These animals aren't thriving because they sleep less. They're surviving despite sleeping less. And there's a profound difference between those two states. You are fortunate in ways these animals are not. You live in a world with doors that lock, with roofs that shelter, with no predators stalking through the night. You have the privilege of safety, the luxury of being able to close your eyes for 8 hours without risking your life. This isn't weakness. It's one of the greatest gifts of modern human existence. One that our ancestors, sleeping in trees or huddled around fires, couldn't always count on. And yet, paradoxically, we're using that safety not to sleep better, but to sleep less, filling the protected hours of night with screens and stimulation, squandering the very opportunity that evolution has given us. The science is clear, clearer now than it's ever been. Sleep is when your brain clears the metabolic waste that accumulates during waking hours. proteins like beta amyloid that are linked to neurodegenerative diseases. Sleep is when your synapses are pruned and strengthened, when memories are consolidated, when learning is integrated into long-term knowledge. Sleep is when your immune system produces the cells and proteins that fight infection and inflammation. Sleep is when your body repairs tissues, regulates hormones, and maintains the delicate balance of systems that keep you alive and functional. You cannot skip these processes, you can only defer them, and deferred biological debt always comes due, often with interest. The animals we've studied have taught us that sleep can take many forms, that it's more flexible than we once thought, that evolution is endlessly creative in finding solutions to impossible problems. But they've also taught us that no species, no matter how well adapted, has found a way to eliminate sleep entirely. The fruit fly mutants still sleep, just less. The cavefish still rest, just briefly. The dolphin still shuts down half its brain every day. The universality of sleep across every animal with a nervous system tells us something profound. This is not optional. This is not a bug in the system. This is the system, working exactly as it should, maintaining the miracle of consciousness in a universe that tends toward disorder. So what should you take from tonight's journey? First, give yourself permission to need sleep, not as a guilty indulgence, but as a biological imperative. You are not a dolphin. You cannot split your consciousness. You are not a frigate bird. You cannot function on microsleeps indefinitely. You are human, and humans need real, substantial, quality sleep to function at their best. This is not a personal failing, it's a design feature, carefully preserved because it works better than any alternative evolution has yet discovered. Second, protect your sleep as you would protect any other vital resource. You wouldn't go days without food or water and expect to feel fine. Don't go days without adequate sleep and expect different results. Create an environment that supports rest, darkness, quiet, coolness, comfort. Maintain consistent sleep schedules when possible, allowing your circadian rhythms to stabilize and predict when rest should occur. Address the factors that disrupt sleep, whether that's caffeine too late in the day, screens in the bedroom, stress that keeps your mind racing, or habits that fragment the very rest you're trying to achieve. Third, recognize that the modern world is not designed for good sleep. Artificial light extends day into night, confusing the ancient systems that regulate your sleep-wake cycle. Constant connectivity means you're never truly off, never fully able to let go of the day's demands. Work cultures often reward sleeplessness and punish rest, creating environments where exhaustion becomes a badge of honor. Understanding that these are external pressures, not reflections of your personal inadequacy, can help you resist them more effectively. You're not failing because you need sleep. The system is failing by not supporting it. Fourth, remember that adaptation takes time. If you've been chronically sleep deprived for months or years, one good night won't fix everything. Your body has accumulated debt, and that debt must be repaid gradually, consistently, over weeks or even months of adequate rest. Be patient with yourself. The fatigue you feel isn't permanent. It's your body's way of asking for what it needs. And when you finally provide it, when you finally prioritize sleep as the biological necessity it is, you'll begin to notice changes. Clearer thinking, better mood regulation, improved physical health, greater resilience to stress. These aren't miracles. They're just what happens when you stop fighting your biology and start working with it. Tonight, as you close your eyes, think about the dolphin one more time, half asleep, half awake, swimming through an ocean that never stops. It's a beautiful adaptation, a testament to life's creativity, but it's also a compromise born of necessity, not choice. You have a choice. You can sleep fully, deeply, with both hemispheres resting together, both eyes closed, your whole body surrendered to the restorative power of true rest. This is your advantage. This is your gift. Don't waste it. If you enjoyed tonight's exploration into the mysteries of sleep and survival, consider subscribing to this channel. We'll continue diving into the quiet wonders of biology, the stories written into every living thing, the connections that bind us all together. Leave a comment sharing what surprised you most tonight, or tell us about your own relationship with sleep. And if you found this helpful, if it gave you permission to rest or understanding about why rest matters, share it with someone who might need to hear the same message. Sleep well, knowing that in resting, you're doing exactly what billions of years of evolution have prepared you to do. You're clearing waste from your brain, you're consolidating memories, you're healing your body, you're preparing for another day of consciousness, of thought, of being alive and aware in a universe that makes such things possible. The dolphins will keep swimming, the birds will keep flying, and you'll keep sleeping like a human, fully and deeply, because that's what your biology asks of you, and that's not a weakness. That's wisdom. Good night.